An unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Well, good evening, everyone. We are so fortunate to have our teacher with us tonight, Reverend Gyokei Yokoyama. And he is visiting on behalf of Soto Zen Buddhism North America office. And he is going to be announcing the 100th anniversary of Zen in America, of Soto Zen Buddhism in North America. The purpose of his visit is also to deepen the friendship between our Sanghas and the North America office and the sort of the national governance that holds us all together in our Soto Zen Buddhist voice. So his interesting presentation tonight talks about the perspective on religious pluralism within the Soto Zen tradition and the thread of Zen that runs through diverse expressions based upon his experience as an abbot of a rural community temple in Japan and a minister of a Japanese American Buddhist church and temple and interpreter for the Soto Zen Buddhism North America office, as well as on the board of the ASZB and the Soto Zen Buddhist Association. So he is representing diverse Soto Zen Buddhist communities in Japan and North America. So we are very fortunate then to hear this conversation about intercultural mixing that we have in this country. And I also know about you, Gyokei Sensei, is that I believe you are a student at the university in international studies. Is that what the subject was? International cultural relations?
Intercultural, yes, intercultural communications.
Right.
Soto
Right.
University.
So you are most excellent for this subject tonight. So thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to receiving your teaching.
Oh, thank you very much. It was it's such a pleasure. And with my repentance and my vow to somehow, pay back this whole favor of accommodating our visit and also accommodating the sudden change due to the flight change. And thank you for every one of you who are here online and in person as well for your time and for sharing your presence. And I really hope I get to know your Sangha, the members better. And I'm sure there will be pretty soon another occasion. So at least next time I will fly straight from California. That's what I promise. Now, thank you so much for the introduction. This trip I've been making this time with my colleague who's also separately traveling through Midwest. I was just traveling in East Coast. So we are reaching out to many different Zen communities in North America. And the reason behind this whole outreach, this sort of announcement of the 100th anniversary of the mission of Soto Zen Buddhism, which started with this temple called Soto Zen Mission or Zenshuji Temple, a temple that was built in 1922. It started from the second floor of one of the members. And then that was actually the year also when the huge earthquake hit Tokyo. And that was so they were doing a fundraising. Then they had to stop, and all the money they collected to build the temple, they had to be donated. It had to be directed to the restoration of the devastated Tokyo region, Kanto region at the time. So I'm also translating the records from back when the temple was built. And it's amazing how the founders of these temples and all the Zen centers have dedicated so much energy, so much time, whole life to build communities. And then when I say 100 years, of course, it started with this immigrants community. And then when it started to penetrate to all corners of this continent through various lineages of Zen teachers, American Zen teachers, already many decades have passed. As Edo Roshi introduced me, I was fortunate enough to start the practice, first of all, growing up in the Buddhist community. But then, usually in a teenage, we sort of start to look around and want to sort of make sure this is the path. I was one of the very rebellious type. So I had to explore, see what other paths were out there. And I ended up going to a Catholic school to pursue language education, also intercultural education, where I came across at age 19, actually, the Jesuit priests who were deeply engaged in Zen practice. And that's also when I learned Jesuit people are really intelligent, but also they master the local language. They are willing to learn the local religion and cultures. So that's underneath my sort of, since it happened in late teens, it's always there. I was also a vice abbot of this temple called Iwoji Temple. Then later on took over the temple. Then after a short while, I had a chance to be transferred to Japanese American non-Buddhist, non-denominational Buddhist community. Then now I serve another small temple of Soto Zen. Right around the time of my grandfather, and of course a little bit earlier, there was a movement where all the teachers wanted to go back to the original words of Shakyamuni Buddha. Bukkyo Dendo Gyokei, Association of Soto Zen Buddhist dissemination. There was a sort of a non-profit community who started to distribute this book, Shakyamuni Buddha's words. And there was certainly a movement. And my grandfather, watching him, when I was small, I could see there's a sort of movement to look back at this lineages, all the tradition of sectarianism, and it's sort of trying to be more, come back to the pure teachings. And then when I think about that particular generation and how all the teachers like Shinju Suzuki Roshi, Hakuyu Maizumi Roshi, or Dainin Katagiri Roshi, all these teachers came to the North America and wanted to manifest the purity of Zen. It sort of makes sense when I connect that with that, everything that was happening before that in Japan, or around the same time. Dogen Zenji was very much like that. As you know, he wasn't particularly looking for Zen. He was genuinely looking for the Buddha's words, to be as close as possible to what Shakyamuni Buddha was teaching. The purity of Zen, pure practice. That's what I felt when I came to the United States. Sincere, dedicated, full of aspiration. That touched me deeply and still continues to inspire me, reminding me of the value of what I grew up since I was small, which I wasn't even aware of. The Long Beach Buddhist Church, which I served initially, was built with such intention to pursue the pure form, pure teaching of Buddhism. When Dogen brought Soto Zen, he didn't call it Zen, let alone Soto Zen. Only later on, when Keizan Zenji's time came, they started calling this school Soto Zen. If you look at the symbol of Soto Zen Buddhism, I have one over here. It's right here. Are you familiar with the crest of Soto Zen Buddhism? One over here represents Sojiji Monastery or Keizan Zenji spirit. And here is a symbol of Eiheiji Monastery, Dogen Zenji. So in Soto Zen Buddhism, we pay homage, we pay respect to Shakyamuni Buddha, Dogen Zenji, and Keizan Zenji. And I'm sure most of you must be familiar with Dogen Zenji, right? I usually ask, if it's in person, I'd love to ask just how many of you would know, first of all, Dogen Zenji. Okay. Then, all right, thank you. How about, how many of you are familiar with Keizan Zenji?
Oh.
Can you see, Edo-san?
Pardon me?
Can you see how many people are raising hands?
I cannot see. Yeah.
Okay. No.
How many are using their hands?
When I do this in every community with Dogen Zenji, almost everyone raises hands. With Keizan Zenji, I'd say maybe 10% mostly.
Please raise again for Keizan Zenji. Pretty good. Yeah.
See.
Pretty good.
Hiroroshi, my respect to you. Thank you. Keizan Zenji is, yes, another big figure. I mean, that's one of the two founders of Soto Zen Buddhism. And then a lot of people do sort of know Keizan Zenji, but then exactly what he did. In general, we understand Keizan Zenji as someone who respected, of course, Dogen Zenji's teaching, and he's transmitted the teaching himself, traveled himself, but he also was excellent at training, producing multiple students, excellent students. And these excellent students traveled across Japan, each producing more excellent students. And that's how Soto Zen Buddhism grew. So most of us who was born and raised in rural community, Soto Zen Temple, all of us owe this lineage to Keizan Zenji's students. So if you compare Dogen Zenji, it sounds a little old-fashioned, but as a father-like figure, very strict, who brought this authenticity, integrity, the verification of practice, and enlightenment. Keizan Zenji, we compare it to something like a mother-like figure who embraced diverse cultures through and allowed different temples to be part of Soto Zen school. And so such is the image as community temple monk priest that I have. When Soto Zen Buddhism was spreading in 1500s, 1600s, there were already existing religions, existing traditions. And so I have a little bit of a question here. I will start with the temple that I grew up in. This was the main image of the Iboshi temple it's not exactly the same statue. I wonder how many of you can tell what Buddha this is. And of course, it's on Zoom, so I'll say the name. He's holding the pot for medicine. So we always can immediately tell this is a medicine Buddha. Medicine Buddha. Yakushi. When we chant sutras, at the end, we pay respect and we dedicate the service of practice to Shakyamuni Buddha. Then also the main Buddha of each community temple, which is often different Then in my case, it was Shakyamuni Buddha, the medicine Buddha, Dogen Zenji, and Keizan Zenji. Also, interesting thing about the Yoji temple, the community temple that I was born was, there was a pond called Amitabha Buddha Pond. So that was another local indigenous, already existing culture. And this is the Amitabha Buddha. And so when I was small, commuting to the school, every time I go walk in front of Amitabha Buddha's pond, I pay respect. And so we also pay respect Amitabha Buddha. Namu Amitabha. Namu.
Sensei,
And,
excuse me, may I interrupt? I wanted to show you what we have on on Dogen Zenji altar. This is Yakushi Norai.
Oh, yes.
That we have right in our Zendo.
Oh, wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you. With the Yakushi Nyorai, we say, Onkoro Sendari Matoro Misoakai. Onkoro Sendari. Right? There we have a mantra for Yakushi medicine. And I wonder if you recognize this. Let's see. Here you go. This is Dainichi Nyorai. Mahaviro-chan. Mahaviro-chan. Rush, have you seen?
Yes.
Okay. It was not in my temple, but one of the community hall had Mahaviro-chan. So I go and pay respect to Mahaviro-chan. And I probably know this, have seen this image before. Let's have a look. Usually they're standing at the gate. Kongo Rikishi. Kongo Rikishi. So he's a very muscular figure who drives away the enemy of Buddha Dharma. In Zenshuji temple that I work, I have a colleague, senior, called Toho Sensei, and is a semi-professional American football player as well. So he is very much like Kongo. If you have a chance to come to Zenshuji, please, you can probably meet him. Another statue that we always worship, was always in the temple, was this statue of, is not Dogen Zenji, but is Kukai, Kobo Daishi, the founder of Shingon Buddhism, which precedes the Dogen Zenji. Its stories can be found everywhere in Japan. Likewise, we pay respect to Kukai, Namu Kinsho. And then maybe this is an interesting one. It's a little bit difficult to see. I wonder if you can see the image of the fox. Inai. This is, you can see the shaped statue of fox everywhere, especially in my town. They were everywhere because nearby my temple was a training temple, Soto Zen Buddhism, called Yokohama Inai. This training temple had Shakyamuni Buddha, Dogen Zenji Keizan, of course. And right next to the temple in the same property was the shrine where they worshipped the deity of Dakini. Dakini. This is just a picture, one example. Dakini was wished to be a wicked one who eats human flesh. Then she was converted to Buddhism with a teacher, with another Buddha, then became a deity, protector of Buddha Dharma. Fox is known to be the retainer, someone who serves Dakini. So we pay respect to fox. When I was small, I used to find it a little scary because the fox is everywhere, especially at night in a temple premise. My temple was in an extremely rural area and there's no street light. And you walk at night with a flashlight and you find these fox in corners. So, but they're also important images for us. And then just like that, we also have images, Buddha's statues of Ojizo-sama, the Kushigarba. Just like the image of the box when we commute to school, when I was commuting to school in grade 2 or 3, it took about 45 minutes on foot. We walk. But in this commuting route, every 10 minutes or so, you find the statue of Ojizo-sama, the Kushigarba. And we were told to pay respect to Ojizo-sama. And we do, because it's such a beautiful, spiritual culture we have there. Until maybe we turn around 12, 13, and we sort of stop doing it because we enter adolescence. Just a couple more. Then we have another image. It's not a statue, but Benzai Sarasita. We can find her usually enshrined, worshipped in the lotus pond. The temple that has also a lotus pond, and that's where you find her. Another guardian of Buddha Dharma. Probably this is everyone's favorite. I'll just introduce just a couple more. This is the Avalokiteshvara, Kannon-san, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Very gentle. Then we have this kind. Budo-myo. Let me see the English title. I have to find this in. Here, Budo-myo is actually, so in original language, I found out it's Akaranata. Well, anyway, we call it Budo-myo. Fierce looking, but is another manifestation of Mahavairochana. So here's something to think about. We have Manjushri Bodhisattva over here. Yes. The Bodhisattva, who is usually in a Zendo, sits right in the middle, watching over us wisdom. Then right next to him, usually we have Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Fugen Bosatsu. Fugen Bosatsu is the one with wisdom and compassion, but also especially known as someone in the Lotus Sutra who helped women teachers to reach awakening. So in Japan, Fugen Bosatsu, Samantabhadra is often the object worshipped for women. We have many different animals, non-human figures who are also the guardians of Buddha Dharma. We also have something like this Ashura, who was another wicked one. His specialty is fighting, pick up fighting. But then he was awakened. He became the guardian of Buddha Dharma. Such is the environments I grew up in, and I'm not the only one. We grow up just being aware of the presence of such bodhisattvas and Buddhas. And then usually our temple has some unique way of conducting ceremonies, service. And that's why we go to head temple to learn a standardized way, which appears to be quite foreign to all of us. But nonetheless, we learn that certain form. We'll come back to the community. All these images that we grew up in, when we chant sutras toward the end, we place our hands in gassho and we dedicate a practice to all Buddhas throughout space and time, to all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, mahaprajna paran. We say this. And this is the kind of image that always runs through my mind. Now, we're not exactly academic who has this full knowledge of how they were derived from Hinduism, Taoism, but at least what it does to us experientially is this. I always share. You can see. There we go. This is called Ampamman. It's for a children's show. You can see Ampamman right in the center, and all different characters here. Some of them like to fight, some of them like to cook, some of them are very calm, and there's a kind of wicked ones who are also in the picture. And that's kind of what it does to our small children's mind. I mean, if you are the generation who watched Dragon Ball, that's the same thing. Because the essence of that story, although there's a lot of modification, comes from the tale of the West, the story when the monk traveled to attain the sutra. And along the way, there's all wicked ones who eventually become guardians. You can see the same story plot in that manga as well, right? Now, Ampaman's case is a little different, but it's very interesting. What he does is he, it's a story for small children. He patrols, he can fly actually. And whenever he finds someone in trouble, just casually he flies right to them and help them out. If he finds someone who's hungry, what he does is he takes out a portion of his head, because his head, ampa, means a bread of sweet bean paste. So in the US, it's probably like that chocolate croissant. So that's what his head is. So when he finds someone who's hungry, what he does is he just takes out a portion and says, here you go, you can have it. And he gives it right to them. When I saw the show first, I was a bit shocked, but then you get used to it, and it's such a very beautiful story. But whenever he gives a portion of his head, he gets weak because he loses a portion of his power. So in the story, he often gets defeated. Well, but before I move on, I have to assure you, when that happens, there's a couple of friends, Uncle Jam and Sister Butter. So they make new bread, and then that can replace his head. So he's usually supported by his friends. He'll be okay. This is a very popular animation show for smaller children. The creator of this character, the animation, Mr. Takashi Yanase, he has left some messages regarding Ampaman. The concept of by Ampaman is derived from bodhisattvas. Actually, many of the characters we find in a subculture often are based on distantly from the idea of bodhisattvas of all different characters. In the United States, we use the words justice. Hero stories, of course, we have the hero story here. In such a diverse culture, in diverse sort of, ethnicities, different types of people, different types of religions, cultures. Mr. Yanase says, for him, his definition of justice is a little different. He says, justice in his mind is not something where the super powerful heroes will defeat the enemies completely. Rather, for him, the justice is something where the most ordinary person, most regular person does something knowing that they might get hurt. So naturally, inevitably, they might get hurt. They might get defeated. They might get overwhelmed or exhausted, burned out. Justice, according to Mr. Yanase, is that you do not mind that. You do not get bothered, even slightly. Anpanman sort of goes around and patrols, and knowing this, having this understanding. We have a Japanese word called kakugo. Kakugo. When I translate it, or so say as a verb, kakugo shimasu, kakugo. I usually translate it as you make up your mind or you're determined. But if you look at this very closely, kakugo both have the same meaning. There are some that are familiar with kanji letters. They both means satoru, satoru, awaken, awaken. Mr. Yanase explains that Anpanman doesn't have the slightest hesitation when he goes to help people in trouble, people who need help, because he cannot help but help them. He doesn't do this because it's his responsibility or he's supposed to. He cannot help but do this. And in Buddhism, we call that bodhicitta, body mind, the mind of the bodhisattva. It's not because we have to help them or that's our responsibility. That's what we signed up to do. We do this because you cannot help it. For Anpanman, helping people is not his duty, is not his mission. It's his life itself. Soto Zen Buddhist practice comes with some intensity, especially if you do it in a very traditional way. You would expect. And in a Western culture, with some European values, family values, our awareness with, career goals or family values, some of it aspect might appear a little bit too demanding or asking a lot. I mean, a lot of time Japanese people are seen or have a reputation of hardworking, dedicated, and occasionally workaholic. We work to an extent sometimes you might not imagine. I do translation work sometimes. At one time, 5 nights straight with no sleep and with course taking naps. And I can see, I'm in New York right now, so I can see such intensity does exist in all cultures. But then some of you might see, isn't that like sacrificing a life, sacrificing a portion of personal private life? Anpanman takes out a portion of his head. It always is everything okay? Yeah.
First time I've seen this here.
Oh, really?
I hope everything's okay there.
We just have something interesting happening outside. So thank you. Yeah. We're
Okay.
just taking care of it, observing.
All right.
Okay.
So anyway, again, Mr. Yanase says, Anpanman, although he takes out a portion of himself, he says it's not a sacrifice. It doesn't get to be seen as a sacrifice. When we do some justice movement, justice work, we may sort of have this mindset, we have to do this at the cost or making some sacrifices. But in Ampaman's case, it's not a sacrifice. And the reason why Mr. Yanas has said so is because Ampaman doesn't have this notion that he's doing this. There's not a slightest hesitation there. When we have the slightest hesitation, when we do, there's the slightest distinction between the self and others, then that practice suddenly becomes a sacrifice. And that's something for all Soto Zen practitioners has to keep in mind, because if you are especially dedicated and if you're committing yourself, this differentiation comes as a sense of self-sacrifice. In Buddhism, Dogen Zenji said, when you have this subtle sense of distinction between self and others, then you cannot do this action. You cannot do it the same way as this Ampaman does. Of course, Dogen Zenji didn't know about Ampaman, but it is the same thing. The reason why I decided to talk about these characters, different types of Bodhisattva and Buddhas, actually came from this image that I saw in New York Zen Mountain Monastery in 2018, when I attended a conference for Soto Zen Buddhist Association, which is an American organization. Statue of Jesus Christ was well respected in this Zen monastery. It really warmed my heart. There was the Native Americans culture. There is a Christian Catholic tradition that preceded Zen. Of course, with all the immigrants. We have this foundation. When I served in Long Beach Buddhist Church, non-denominational pure community, I felt the sense of this Protestant culture. And what I learned there was how hard these Japanese immigrants had to assimilate to the Christian value, American value, then still maintaining this Buddhist value simultaneously. So now, other teachers have to explain the multiplicity, pluralism of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas. And that's often the hard thing. But the reason why I think it's important nowadays is because of the diverse lineages, diverse traditions. All different types of Zen communities have been flourishing in North America, often disconnected or just unaware of each other. I'm here to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Soto Zen Buddhism, which of course is counted from the time this community temple was built. But this is also an occasion we are entering the next century, the next 200. I personally, individually have this mission to extend this work to the Canadian side, as I am becoming American citizens this week after spending time here for 10 years. I will cut off my tie with Japan legally. I will commit myself to this continent as a US citizen, and also extending this work across the Canadian border. So getting to know the communities, learning how to honor these diverse expressions is both the mission of Soto Zen Buddhism and also my personal mission as well. Understanding the European way of life is often visible in Canada and some parts of the US. Understanding the native land spirits, immigrants' cultures. Edo Roshi mentioned that I studied intercultural study in this school. I think it's a beautiful thing to say, intercultural understanding, exchange, friendship, world peace. But What it really means is it takes more than just our gentle, kind feelings. It has to come with our determination or kakugo, the understanding that would not, like that of Ampam. We have the image of Dogen Zenji, Keizan Zenji, a symbol of Soto Zen Buddhism. Eiheiji and Sojiji, Dogen Zenji and Keizan Zenji spirit. Practice, verification of practice and enlightenment, integrity of as Soto Zen Buddhist practitioners. The heart of Keizan Zenji that allowed us to penetrate and embrace all differences. It essentially shares the same thing of kakugo. It requires us to make up my mind. I can see at the Olympia Zen Center, this group for joining. Now, with that line, I'd like to just share the messages of Reverend Ikeda, who is going to have a talk, share his talk. The teacher who was supposed to come to the United States but could not because of the pandemic. I had the honor to translate this message, so I'd like to share this with you. Reverend Kosa Ikeda, can you wish happiness to those who dropped bombs in your town? Can you wish happiness to those who threaten the life of your family? Can you forgive those who hurt your most beloved child and wish happiness to them? In Soto Zen Buddhism, we recite the verse, may this merit extend universally to all. And when we say all, we mean all, including the ones we hate, ones who hate us, the ones we cannot possibly forgive. Yet, we say universally to all. It takes kaku. It takes understanding. We encounter difficult times. Reverend Ikeda had been some difficulties. I'm sure he will share on 12th. The hardship of the cold weather, the difficulty is something that's beyond our power. But it's not the cold that affects us. How we live our life is not a matter of if there's a cold weather difficulty or not. It is the matter of ourselves. What you bear on your shoulders would not make you a fool. What you bear on your shoulders will never block your path. Fear your own mind that wants to make you a fool. Fear your own mind wanting to stop this walk that you have on the path. Now, with this message read, I'd like to share the message from the head priest of Soto Shu. He addressed in April 2022. This is an official message from Soto Shu. We're now faced with many difficulties and uncertainties, and a way of life is being questioned. The global spread of the novel coronavirus has resulted in the loss of many precious lives, and people are in deep turmoil. International conflicts and civil wars, social problems such as poverty, discrimination, inequality, bullying, and incidents that take lives, as well as natural disasters and global environmental changes that have been occurring frequently in recent years, have brought about a crisis of survival for us all. What kind of way of life should we, who live by the teachings of the one Buddha and two founders, strive for? The Buddha taught us to live with wisdom and compassion. Wisdom is the ability to realize the truth of life, which is animated by all things. Compassion is the ability to eliminate suffering and lead people to peace of mind with a heart of infinite empathy. With wisdom and compassion, we can be tolerant and accept each other's different standpoints. Keizan Zenji taught us to accept the sorrows and sufferings of others as if they were our own, and to live in harmony with one another. This year, let us continue to deepen our human relationships by sharing, supporting, and caring for one another with cooperation, one of the Bodhisattva's 4 embracing actions. Dogen Zenji stated, although this Dharma is abundantly present in each person, it isn't manifested without practice. In this way, he admonished us to carefully apply his teachings to our daily lives. Let us all join hands with the Buddha and proceed with the practice of a bodhisattva by being familiar with Zazen and praying together to live peacefully so that no one in the world is left behind. In 2024, the 700th anniversary of Keizan Gyokei Zenji, the founder of Daihonzan Sojiji, will be celebrated. I hope that you will appreciate this precious opportunity to experience this Dharma connection, and that you will deepen your faith together with us. Homage to Shakyamuni Buddha. Homage to the great ancestor Joyo Daishi Dogen Zenji. Homage to the eminent ancestor Josai Daishi Keizan Zenji. Gassho. April 1st, 2022. Ishizuki Shuko, head priest of Soto. Thank you for listening. I'd like to conclude my message yet with one more short article that I found thought would be beneficial. One I wanted to share actually, which I roughly translated right before I set off to my travel for this trip. This is a translation of the message greeting from Reverend Shundo Aoyama, the first woman teacher who became the Seido, one of the main directors of the head monastery. Here's her greetings and messages. Message as my will for the young monastics. Practice of gratitude. Shundo Aoyama, Seido of Sojiji Head Monastery. Last fall, Ishizuki Geika Zenji kindly asked me several times to consider assuming the position of Seido, and I shamelessly accepted this offer, despite where I was standing in terms of health. For the last several years, I suffered a series of serious illness multiple times. And also being at age 90, I feel ashamed and humble when I think about how I could be useful when there is only so little that I can do about my health. Dr. Kyuki Ota, a professor of Komazawa University, known for its study on Yogacara, once said, Buddhism talks about cause and effects. But we can only have so much say in relation to the cause. We cannot have our say regarding the effects. All we can do is to accumulate good causes, following the guidance of good teachers. So following the professor's advice, without asking myself about the effects, I've been telling myself to do whatever I can as a practice of gratitude. Blessed with this life through multiple illness in my age, I find each occasion of conveying my messages as an occasion to convey my will to the young practitioners which deeply touches my heart. Shakyamuni Buddha awakened to the universal and eternal truth. 2,500 years have passed. Countless number of sages and ancestral teachers attained this teaching through body and mind, giving their whole life to the way and transmitted it through their Jinkaku Sojo, through their characters, through their personalities, all the way to right where we are standing today. I sincerely wish that this light of Buddha Dharma will remain undistorted and stay strong. She concludes this article with one short point. かしこみて伝え祭らん後の世に、君が掲げし王の灯し。The flame of the Dharma you have lit, humbly and respectfully, I transmit to the next generation. So this concludes my message. Thank you very much for your attention, for your time, and being with us today. ありがとうございました。Now, if you have any questions or, let's say, regarding this talk, regarding Buddha Dharma, or regarding anything, since I also come from the Soto Zen Buddhism North America office. So if you have any questions, please email as long as the time allows this.
May I speak? This is Joan on Zoom.
Hi, Joan. Yes.
I enjoyed the talk so much. It was very informative and well presented. The only one thing that worried me when you were speaking about the statues and the guardians was when you use the word worship. But you did say that it was more like paying respect.
Mm-hmm.
Because I never want my friends to think that I worship the Buddha like he's a god. So that word just worried me a little bit, but I love it. Thank you so much.
Yes, I think it's one of the translated that words we use for translations. And an interesting thing is, early days when Buddhism came, we borrowed many expressions. In the translation world, the expressions used for Christian context. So from a translator's point of view, during the last decades, I think so much has changed. Scripture itself and the way we translate and interpret words. Now there's more vocabularies, words. We don't have to borrow from the Christian context. So I think, thank you for pointing that out. It's a cultural phenomenon, which is very interesting. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your beautiful talk. Sorry, I'm just going to change the view here. I'm actually not, sorry, I'm still seeing Joan, so I have to find you. There we are. I'm actually not part of the Sangha in Olympia. I'm on the mailing list, and I actually am in Victoria, British Columbia. So when I hear you speak about your enthusiasm for bringing more Soto Zen to Canada, it really warms my heart and makes me very, very happy to hear.
Thank you. It's wonderful to meet you. Yes, I've been talking about this for the last 8 years since I moved to the United States from Canada. So yes, all my friends, all my head priests in the head temple, everybody knows this is my intention. And that's one thing I have been consistent throughout the whole half of my life since my teenage. So yes, I'm still trying to find a way to pay back everything that I received from Canadian people. And yes, and there's a very big reason for that. So.
And there's only a few sanghas. And when you speak about culture, as you know, the culture in Canada, it's very similar to the United States, but it's very different too. And I love the idea of Canadian Soto Zen. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful meeting. Thank you.
We had a very interesting exchange. While you were talking, you saw us.
Yes.
And so there were some people out in the garden, and I'd never seen them here before. So I went out and I brought them in. You could see them on the screen, perhaps. But they were from Belgium, two gentlemen from Belgium. And they were visiting in the United States, and they just wanted to see a Zen temple.
Oh, wow.
And that's the same with Patrick. So we have people coming, new people. So all of your energy is bringing this.
That's so wonderful. Yes.
Yeah. So they came in. So one of the gentlemen may come to Zazen tomorrow morning. So.
Oh, great. Yes, I'm happy. Yes. I mean, yes, we still do need to be, vigilant, but I feel the energy, especially spending a few days among that, I feel the energy people wanting to, yes, I feel things are sort of turning with, so I'm glad to see that. I see not all, I kind of sense this happening on different Zen communities as well.
Right.
Thank you. Yes. And Soto Zen Buddhism itself is, it's an institution, but it's not one solid, impermanent, permanent thing. It's subject to impermanence. We are subject to change. Our staff will change. The way of thinking also evolves. And I feel that change, which has been, of course, might appear slow, but there's a change. And 100th anniversary is giving us a very sort of incentive to push ourselves forward in that direction. Partnership, friendship. So 100th anniversary Gyokei embodies our independence, North American Soto Zen's independence, yet solid connection, ties, friendship, partnership between Japanese Soto Zen and North American Soto Zen. So these two might sound a little different, opposite, but this is exactly the same thing that we are trying to achieve. So I'm part of that team there.
I have a question. This is Karen.
Hi, Karen.
In my understanding of Keizan Zenji, he's often described as someone who helped to popularize or spread Soto Zen. And you described a bit about the important role he played in training good teachers who then went out, and some temples changed to Soto Zen temples and so forth. And one of the things that excites me about the 100th anniversary is the idea of, sanghas that look a lot like ours, of very much Eurocentric folks, coming to better understand, for example, the mission, the Soto Zen mission in LA, and more traditionally culturally Japanese American communities, and understanding how we can sort of break some of this, seemingly the walls between our different worlds. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that at all.
Of course. I have both personal and I think a little academic. Duncan Williams, American Sutras, he contributed tremendously to spread this understanding of the history of Japanese American community Buddhism during the internment camp. And I served exactly such kind of community. Those people who were released from the camp with some subsidy from the government, but could not quite make up the living. So they settled in a relatively impoverished area. That's where the church is standing. Buddhist church is still standing today. It's difficult to live there personally with my family. But such was the life they shared. Division, I would not say division. There was a difference there. Difference. Respect their parents, respecting their family values, cultures. In a sense, it's a bit of like a cultural center. Language is preserved. Yeah, there are people who pay respect to this tradition and cultures. Yet still, people who come for the Zazen practice. For example, you might know how Japanese priests, we do Zazen, but when it comes to sesshin and things, unless you go to a training temple, we have a different role because there's a different expectation. We take phone call, it's just a different set of expectation and feelings. So when my students, American students, Italian ancestry came, they all wanted to, I guess, train with me, which I took as a very humbling experience. But Japanese American community been hurt by the lack of sensitivity or lack of unawareness, not just by non-Japanese Americans, but often sometimes by Japanese like us. So I myself was told after several years spending there, Sensei, we do respect you, but we just think you would not ever understand what we went through. And I touched a deep honesty there. And with that understanding, I was still serve the community. So it was a very actually interesting, nice accidents for all the American students who came, and for them to serve this community, willing to understand the history and still find Buddha Dharma in that context, still doing the practice, serving the community. I feel like this community was a wonderful, wonderful Dharma gate, or dragon gate, because it comes like, it tests their ego. It tests their definition of Buddha Dharma, which has been a little bit convenient to them. This community challenges your definition of Buddha Dharma. So it's been good. And 100th anniversary, where a lot of Japanese Americans will be there, generations changing. Third, fourth generation who barely speak Japanese are there, trying to see why do they keep this tradition. So, for them to witness how much this can be appreciated in this continent, has been appreciated, and can be shared with the grandchildren generation, kid generation. I think it has a powerful, powerful message in it. Like Keizan Zenji respected Dogens, that, it's not a separation thing. That's the key. I think that's always the fascinating part of it. It doesn't come as a separation. It comes with the respect. And I think that's what we're trying to embody to this occasion. Anyway, thank you for asking me this. And
thank you very much.
Thank you. Are we ready to finish, Sensei? It's just about time, I think.
okay. Yes.
So,
Thank you very much. Great.
beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed, I vow to become it.
Thank you.